Hello friends, welcome to Science with Me. My name is Dr. Erica with Rosie Research, and we are doing some amazing Codeblocks TinkerCad tutorials. We did a fantastic Mario unit making a video game in Scratch, and we also had some hands-on activities, and one of them was making a magic coin box, and I thought it would be really fun to make it in Codeblocks, especially for our patrons because it can print flat, and if you're a patron of ours, you can send us the STL file of this, and we'll show you how to do that, and we will print it and send it to you, and you can make sort of a more structurally sound coin box than one just made out of cardstock paper. So our coin box sort of has 6 sides. Every box has 6 sides, and 2 of the sides are going to be the side walls that hold the mirror. So we're going to start by making those pieces. So I'm going to come over into my modify, and I'm going to create a new object, and we're going to create a few. So I'm actually going to name this, and I'll name it sort of the square ends, so that we know what item we are making. And it's going to have a shape. It's going to be a box, and let's connect that all the way. There we go. And we want this box to match up in sizing for a 3x3 mirror, which is what we used. And I found through some printing that 60 millimeters by 60 millimeters works great, and our height is going to be 4, which gives us just enough sort of space to fold everything in properly. And now if I build this, I'll get sort of this little square, which looks like the side of a square box, but I'm going to need to cut out a piece for that mirror to sit in. So what we can do is we can make a hole, and the way we do that is right now this square would come in red, but if I click over on this gray circle, it's now going to be a hole, and I can also make some choices about how big this is. And I don't need it to be as big as this box. It's actually going to be a long sort of skinny spot that we're going to cut out of it to put that mirror. So I could do a width of 4. We'll make it really long so we ensure that we cover this diagonal, because the mirror is going to go along that diagonal. And I don't think I really care about the height. That should be fine. So if I now run this program, we sort of see it come in, and we're going to need to rotate it and raise it up. So first we can raise it up, we'll move it, and we can bring over this move, and we are going to move it, let's try 10 up in Z. And then we also are going to want to rotate it, and so we can do that at the same time. It's also in modify, we can bring out a rotate. We want to rotate it sort of this direction, and if we were to have it on a toothpick, we would be holding this blue line right here to spin it the way that we'd like to, and that is along the Z axis. So I'm going to spin it along the Z axis, and we only want to go 45 degrees. So now we can run this and see where we're at, and you can see that it's going to cut a hole for us, which is pretty great. In fact, we could create a group right here for the moment, and you can see now I have this lovely little spot for my mirror to go into. But if I want my box to fold up, I need to cut in some bevels on this. If you've done other code blocks with us, you know that that is our trick for being able to print it and ship it to you guys pretty easily. So the way that we'll do that is we are going to create a loop. So this is count with I, and I'm going to count with I from -1 to 1. And that's because I'm sort of centered on 0. So one of them I could put here. How much ever I want to shift will be negative, and then positive over here. It lets me do math really, really easily. So we'll go to the shapes, and we'll get a roof right here, and we are going to make this one a hole. So right now it's green, but we can click on that gray spot to make it a hole. And we do want it to be pretty long, just to make sure we catch anything, especially because we can copy this later. We'll make sure that it's going to catch everything. So right now you can see that roof is coming in, but we are going to need to rotate it a little bit. So let's rotate it in modify. We'll go over to rotate, and we'll rotate it around the Y axis this time because I want to flip it over. So you can imagine I want to rotate it around this green, this bright green little piece, and that's the Y axis. So I'm going to rotate around the Y axis, and I want to flip it all the way over. So I'm going to rotate it by 180 degrees. So it's the other direction. You can run that and see how it comes. And then we're going to need to move where this is at. So let's go to modify, and we'll move it. And now in X, I want to move it by half of whatever this is, and it's 60 up here. So I can move it by 30, and I want one time it to move by minus 30 and one time to move by plus 30. Just so happens we have this guy here. We're actually going to count by 2. Let's change that. We'll skip 0. So we'll count by 2. So if I come down here to my math, I can pull out this guy, and I can do a multiplication, and I can pull out I. I'm going to do I times 30. And one of the times I'll be minus 1, so it'll be move minus 30. And the other time it'll be plus 1, so it'll move 30. So I'll get minus 30 and 30 for my X movement. And then I do need to move it up and try about Z is 4. And now if we run this, you can see that these guys are creating this great bevel. Now, I'm going to make this part a little bit wider right off the bat so that this bevel is more in. Right now it's a 45-degree angle, which should fold perfectly into a box, but I found that they fold a lot better if we sort of make it a little easier from the beginning so that they can fold in more than 90. And the way we do that is with a scale, and I'm going to put it right underneath that roof. So right underneath the roof, I'm going to put a scale, and I'm just going to scale X by 2. All right, and then I can hit go, and you can see how they're wider, and it cuts a little bit more off. And that's going to really help me when I'm folding this and putting this piece together. All right, so I've done the sides, and now I need to do the top and the bottom. And the way that I can do that quickly is I'm going to duplicate this whole piece right here. And I'm going to put it down in the bottom, right underneath it. And this time, I'm still going to rotate around Y by 80 degrees, but I also need to rotate this to go sort of along the top and bottom. And that I would be rotating around this blue one, and that would be around Z. So I'm going to add a second rotation. I'm going to rotate around Z this time by 90 degrees, and I'm going to move my math over into Y. Because now I'm going to go from 0, or from negative 30 in Y to plus 30. I'm going up and down instead of left and right. So we can see what that looks like, and this is looking great. So what I can do is I can create a group out of this, and we can see sort of what our finished product looks like, which looks awesome. Alrighty, and just to make sure that we're going to be set up later, I'm going to rotate this around the Z-axis also by 90 degrees, and that's going to help me just have it set up later. It's just going to put it the other direction. Beautiful. Alright, so that's our first object that we are going to make. Now we're going to make another object, and we are going to make sort of the top of it where we have the coin piece that goes in. So I can come up here to create new object. And I'm going to drag this out. And I'm going to rename this my coin wall. And again, that helps me stay really organized. All right, so for my coin wall, it's actually going to be a rectangle instead of a square, and that's because the mirror is 3 inches by 3 inches, but it's going to be at this angle, so it's really 60 millimeters by 3 inches tall. So we've got to do a little bit of math there, and that ends up being 76.2 millimeters. So I'm going to add a new box, and it's going to be, let's move this over a little bit. It's going to be 76.2 millimeters is what we want there, and then our length will be 60, which will make sure it lines up with the side here, and our height is going to be 4. All right, and now we can look at what that guy will look like. In fact, maybe we should change the color of it. Let's change it to a different color. And they sort of build on top of each other, and that's okay because we will sort of figure that out in a little bit, but you can see how this one's more of a rectangle. All right, but we need to cut that slit in there. So let's cut a slit in our box. And we can do that by adding another box. And we will make sure it's a hole by clicking on the gray here. And then we can click the arrow to get more options. Now the width we're going to put as 25. That will ensure that a quarter can get in. If you want to make something larger, like maybe a $50, you could increase this number to make sure that it's going to be wide enough to put in a $50. All right, our length, we're going to do 5, so it's going to be long and skinny. Our height can be 20, that should be just fine. And now we can kind of see where that coin box is going to be. So that's the hole I'm going to put my coins in as I trick people about where things are. But of course, since I'm folding everything up, this also needs those beveled edges that we made in the square ends. So what we can do is we can copy this. Oops, I was going to copy the whole thing. Let's throw some of this away. But we can copy a bunch of this, just like that. And then we can go through and change it. So instead of moving x by 30, we want to move it by half of 76.2, which is 38.1. And that whole chunk will stay all the same other than that. And then down here, we are going to keep it at 30. All right, and then we can create the group here. And we can take a look at what that will look like. So you can rebuild it, and you can see that I have these beveled edges, and I have this cutout for the coin piece. Now, if you wanted to, you can move these things out as you're building them, but then you have to keep track of where they go when we build our final piece. It's actually ends up being a lot easier to build your final piece if you have them all in the middle like this. All right, so now we have the coin wall, and then we also have some sort of plain walls, like the bottom and the back will be a plain wall, and then we're also gonna have a window wall. So let's make our plain wall next. And that'll be very similar to what we just made. So let's rename this a plain wall, like that. And the plain wall is the coin wall, but without the hole. So we can come up here and duplicate this, like that. We'll pull this down and we'll delete that piece right there. And this will just now be a wall with no hole in it. But let's change the color. We'll change it to yellow, and we can watch it build. And now the yellow one is not gonna have it. And you can kind of see it by that, in fact, it's all sort of colored through right there. All right, that was a quick and easy way to make that plain wall. Now we are going to make the wall with the window that we look through. So this is what creates that illusion, the window we look through and see the mirror and don't realize it's a mirror. So we'll create a new object, and this will be our window wall. And to make this one, it's also going to be very, very similar to the other ones, except for our window is going to be bigger than the coin piece. So I can actually copy all of this and bring it down here. So this looks like a ton of code, but a bunch of it has been sort of reused and copied. I'm going to change the color of this, maybe to pink. And I'm going to change the size of my hole. So right here was the size of my coin hole, and I want to be able to peer through something that's much bigger than that coin hole. So I'm going to make the width 65. I'm going to make the length, let's say 47 here. And everything else, I think I can keep the same. This all looks good to me. So now when I run it, I'll have like another piece that's going to be sort of an outlined piece. So there's my pink, and so you can see how I'm going to have this great window to look through my mirror in. All right, so we have all 4 of these pieces, and these are the only unique pieces we have in it. So now we need to actually make the coin box. So we'll create a new object. This one we will call our coin box. So let's call this the coin box. And this is what's going to really build it up. So right now we've just sort of made the pieces. Now we need to build it and make it look amazing. So the way you can do this is we're going to add a copy. And if you scroll down to your data or click on data, you'll have all of the different walls we just made. So first we can start with the window wall. So we'll add a copy of our window wall. And now we're going to move it. And this is the beauty of leaving all of these things right here, is we know exactly where everything's going to start. It's always going to start from their center point being at 0, 0. So we want to move our window wall, and we're going to move it by y is minus 60. All right, and then we are going to add a copy of our coin wall. And so we'll go down to data and make sure here you choose coin wall and not coin box. So make sure you're adding a copy of your coin wall. And we can group this together so that when we move it, it's going to move everything. So let's create a group. So those 2 are now joined, and we'll move both of them up by, or down, I guess, by 60. So we're sort of adding a piece, moving it down, adding a piece, moving it all down, and getting ready. after our coin wall, we are going to add a new one. Oops. Here, and that's going to be just a plain wall. So we'll add that plain wall in. We'll create a group just like we did last time. And then we are also going to move that. So we can go to modify. We want to move it. We're going to move it down by 60. You can see how we're sort of building this up. And we're going to print these off into sort of two long skinny pieces so they can fit into an envelope. So we'll move Y by 60, and we're also going to, well, we're going to end up moving it up. Let's we'll move it up by 140, which should clear the other one. So instead of moving Y by 60, let's move it by 140. And we can see what we get if we build what we have so far. You can kind of see that we've got this great, here are 3 of the pieces that have come together, and these will fold into a box, which is great. But of course we need the pieces that go off to the side and the bottom now. So let's add those pieces. So now we're going to add a copy of the object, and we can add our square ends. Let's see. Oops, data. There we go. We'll add our square ends in, just like that. And we will move that. And our move is going to be slightly different this time. So we're going to move the square ends by 68.1 in the negative direction of x. So minus 68.1 for x. And everything else will stay the same. And then we're going to add another copy of our square ends, because there's 2 square ends. So we'll add another copy of the square ends. And we will now move that to positive 68.1. So let's find my move. And I'll move to plus 68.1. Just like that. And we can run it and see where we're at right now. So these guys are about to build up. And then there's the 2 square ends. So you can see how it's about to come together. I think actually, since this is building right and left, I'm going to rotate this big group so it can line up right and left. And I can do that right up here. I can pull a rotate in. And right after I move everything, and before I make my square ends, I can rotate this around the z-axis by 90. And so now it's going to, they'll end up being sort of lined up with each other. And you can see how this is looking. It's looking fantastic. In fact, it's almost looking like it's done, except for there's technically nothing here. This is sort of these objects we made. So we're going to add in our plane wall next. So let's add in, where are we at? Here we go. Add a copy of object. We're going to add in our plane wall, like that. And we will create the group. Oop. And now we can delete all of our other objects so that we don't have to see them. So we're going to have a bunch of delete objects in here. Specifically, we'll have 4, because we made 4 different types of walls. So we can delete our square ends, we can delete our coin wall, we can delete our plane wall, and we can delete our window wall. Make sure you don't delete your coin box, because that's what we just made. So if we run through this, we can see where we come out. And this is kind of amazing, but you'll notice if you folded these 2 pieces up, you can't put a mirror there. This one's not quite right? A mirror would have to go in 2 different directions. We can fix that with a rotate. So let's go up to our modify, and we'll put a rotate after our second square wall right here, above the plane wall. And we can rotate around Z by 90 degrees. All right, so now if we build this up, let's see what we get. And now you can see how if I folded both of these in, there'd be a slot for that mirror to go in. And you can imagine how here's the coin slot and the window would fold sort of up here. This would be the back piece. This turns into the bottom, and the mirrors will be held right there. And it will all come together beautifully for us. Now, if you're a patron of ours, we will print and ship this to you, which is kind of amazing and fun. It's a great way to get into it really easily. And the way that you get the file to us is you hit export up here, and you would hit .stl and send us the .stl file. We just ask that you put your name in it and make sure that when you send it through your patron email address, you give us your address that we can send it to. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you guys had a ton of fun making this Mario Secret Illusion coin box with us in TinkerCad Codeblocks. Have a great one, friends, and we'll see you next time.